welcome today. I just will start by going through a few minor housekeeping components. So the session today should take about 30 minutes. We've got about 20 minutes for the presentation and 10 minutes for the Q&A at the end. So if you've got questions, please type them into the window at the bottom left corner, and we'll try to get through as many as we can. Those that we can't, we'll follow up with you further later. The presentation will be made available online at a later date as well, so you'll be able to forward this on and watch it later. So today I've got with us David Evans, or I should probably start with myself. I'm Matthew van der Linden. I'm the founder and director of Flowpath. And I also have David Evans here as well.
I am the Director of Projects and Engineering, and I've been working with Flowpath for a number of years in the demand response space.
And we also have William with us as well today.
Hi, my name is William Salas. I'm one of the engineers for Flowpath, and I'm heading up this demand response program. You may watch control that goes with it.
Okay, I should have missed that slide, didn't I? So Flowpath, we're a licensed electricity retailer. Basically make available the same tools that your traditional retailer uses to access the retail, make them available to end-use customers. Our goal in the market is to make that simple and to make it normal in the electricity industry. And at Flowpath, we're really here to team up with customers. We're not just here to build customers for electricity. We're here to really team up with them on at a real level, at a day-to-day level, in how they use their power. And this demand response program is a good example of the sorts of things that we're very focused on achieving. It's actually a huge focus for us to bring this together and bring it to you today. So I'll cover what we're going to talk about today. So today we're going to talk about the electricity market, just more generally what's going on. We'll go over briefly how the demand response program works, and then we'll get a bit more involved with what's actually involved as we run a demand response event today, and then we'll also provide an example of an actual event and the actual steps that take place during an event. And then at the end we'll have a bit of time for the questions and talk about the next steps. So the electricity market. So coming up to this summer, we have quite a interesting scenario. Sort of, if we look at these charts that I'll bring up for you, we're in a position that's a bit unique in this year. So I'll just get to our chart. So this is the projection of AMO data coming forward to I think it's called the medium-term PASA report, and it shows the demand and supply situation in Victoria. The red on that chart shows the shortfall. It's actual. You can see on the right-hand side there, it's 700 megawatts or 800 megawatt shortfall. Now, this is the first time, one of the first times I've seen us enter a summer with that sort of shortfall. So we do in Victoria particularly have a significant shortfall in the market in terms of the load and the demand that's there. So it is a unique summer that we're coming up for. We are expecting a little bit more volatility, which we haven't seen much in Victoria at all over the past few years, but this summer is a unique situation. So if I just go into briefly the causes of supply shortfall. So obviously the major things that cause an issue in the market is obviously a decrease in generation. That's the major thing that have happened in Victoria with the shutdown at Hazelwood. And that really has put a bit of strain on Victoria. But you combine that with the fact that we're also bringing on different types of generation. So we're bringing on wind and solar, and they are less predictable. So they can disappear relatively quickly, particularly the solar as the clouds come over. You can have a significant drop in load. And obviously, as we bring in hot days, which I'm sure will continue to happen in Australia, as we move forward, that they also put a lot of strain on the grid, and they cause things like the interconnectors to constrain, which reduces import into the state. And interestingly, Victoria's in a unique situation now where we used to be a net exporter of power to other states. Over this summer, we're expected to be a net importer. So that that situation has dramatically changed. So we're a little bit more like SA, which has been a net importer for a very long time. Victoria is now becoming a net importer as well. And basically, this change in demand and supply can cause unpredicted events. So the key thing about what causes a shortfall in supply, what I would say it is it's where fundamentally is where the demand outstrips the supply. But what causes that, and this is probably something we'll talk about a bit more, but it's fundamentally where, another way of looking at it is where the demand doesn't respond to the available supply. So where the demand has no recognition of what's going on the supply side, that's when you obviously get into trouble. And demand response is about trying to, I guess, correct that for us. So a big question is, why don't we just build more? And we can, but it takes a long time to build generation. To build a major coal-fired power station, it will take years to do that. I'm not sure the Snowy Hydro scheme which they're bringing on. Does anybody? I think that's like 5 or 6 or 7 years.
Yeah, significant capital investment as well.
Yeah, it's a very large capital investment. So it takes time and it's very expensive. And it takes time to build more poles and wires where those things are situated. Building more is definitely an option, but it's probably not the smartest option. This is where demand response comes in, that it is actually a very good way to, it's the most cost-effective way at the moment to fix the issue. So, and probably the other thing that's probably worth just very briefly pointing out is it's actually not logical just to build more. The electricity industry is enormously dynamic. It responds to at a millisecond level. So we've got already things in our lives that are demand based. So I had a good example this morning of trying to get into the city to do this presentation where I had to travel in. Now, if we were to build more, it'd be a bit like taking our road network and making it so that you could hop on the road at any time of the day and just drive into the city. So at 9 a.m. you want to get to the city at 9 a.m. You'd have your own lane and you drive in. If conceptually speaking, you could do it. It'd just be enormously expensive. The electricity network is a bit similar, where you could do it, but it would be enormously expensive. And building more generation is probably going down that line of being enormously expensive. What we need to do first is try to be as efficient as possible, and that will probably fix most of our problems.
Try and match the demand with this available supply.
Yeah, exactly. So I actually caught the train because I knew I'd get here on time, rather than trying to drive the car. And demand response is a bit similar. It's just looking for the most efficient way to achieve a goal. So that's where demand response comes into the mix. So I'm just going to hand over to David now, who's going to take us through the next stage.
Thanks, Matthew. So I'm going to talk about how demand response actually works in practice, and starting with an example that some of you will already be familiar with, which is responding to market price, and we call this a natural demand response. So a very good example of this is where customers, and a number of Flowpower customers, would already be purchasing the electricity at the 30-minute spot price. Now, the demand response works when the price exceeds a certain threshold for that customer, and the customer curtails or reduces their load in response to that price. And the idea, or principally, it means that the customer can avoid the very expensive parts of the market, which are incredibly infrequent, and enjoy the more frequent, lower cost periods or prices in the market. So demand response is an incredibly effective way of a customer getting the best out of the wholesale market, where the customer is able to respond. So an example shown here, where a customer is responding to a market price signal. So you can see in the orange, the customer's load reduces as the price increases and then returns back to normal operation once the price is reduced to normal levels. Importantly, it's worth remembering that these high price periods occur very infrequently in the market, less than 1% of the year. And so the demand response required is relatively, for a customer who can respond, relatively easy to implement.
So that's a demand response to price, fundamentally, isn't it?
Correct.
It's what we're trying to term as natural, compared to the mechanical one, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's coming.
the reason behind, again, to emphasise the reason for doing this is a customer's able to buy electricity essentially below the traditional market cost, because he's avoiding the expensive periods of the market through his demand response.
Yeah.
So again, something that a lot of flow power customers would already be familiar with. Now we're going to look at some of the more formalised programs that are available this summer, and essentially the role that flow power is playing is to aggregate a number of customers and bring these customers together, or this demand capacity together, and this is then offered to the market formally, and customers are then rewarded or paid for the participation or the amount of load that they can reduce in response to market signals. So we're going to talk about these specific programs, but essentially these programs are done at what we call a megawatt level or multi-megawatt level. So it requires a number of customers to join together or join forces with flow power, and essentially flow power manages or aggregates those customers together. And we'll talk about some of the requirements to participate.
It's actually really key, isn't it? Because to get the demand response to work, you've got to that aggregation, that coordination is a really critical part of making it a success.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to talk about lack of reserve, and what that means. So AEMO, or the Australian Energy Market Operator, is responsible for maintaining the stability in the market. This means that AEMO predicts the demand for each state and also the available generation. So when AEMO predicts a lack of reserve or a lack of capacity in the market, they have three different levels that they will nominate in terms of the level of severity, and we'll just go through those. So lack of reserve 1, which is a forecast that AEMO is predicting there may not be enough supply capacity or generation capacity to meet the forecast demand. Lack of reserve 2 is where AEMO is certain that additional capacity will be required, and this is also where demand response programs typically would be brought in. However, they can come in at any level, but typically at LRR2, and the third one is where we would see most of these programs being initiated, meaning that AEMO is looking for, or the market operator is looking for, demand response to meet the shortfall in reserve. So in LRO3, or the lack of reserve 3, this is where involuntary blackouts or load shedding occurs in the market. And so the idea being that if we can bring demand response into the market at LRR2 or LRR1, we can potentially avoid involuntary load shedding or blackouts, meaning essentially keeping the lights on. So by participating in these sorts of programs, customers are actually helping keeping their own supply available and keeping the supply integrity for other customers in the market.
Yeah, and I think in Victoria we're definitely predicting shortfalls. South Australia we are. New South Wales I don't think we are.
Less so, yeah. Less so. Victoria very much so, yeah.
So for those participants out there, I think you're far more likely to be called upon if you're in SA and VIC,
yeah,
and less likely in New South Wales. And when David goes through these programs, you'll see that you get paid when you get called upon, but in some of the programs you also just get money. So
I'm going to talk about the specific programs, and these are state-based. So the first one we're going to talk about is the ARENA funded program. So this is a government-funded program. It's jointly funded by ARENA and the New South Wales government, and it's designed to build additional reserve capacity in the market to meet what is anticipated to be a possible shortfall. As Matthew said, there is less of an issue in New South Wales than Victoria and South Australia, but again, this is a program designed to build capacity. So this particular one requires some installation of hardware. It requires the K-Watch controller to be installed on a customer's site to automate the demand response. It's a 10-minute response required, which I'll elaborate on in a bit more detail. It's a 3-year program, and customers are paid tens of thousands of dollars for participation, or essentially for signing up and enrolling their capacity with the market. Now, some stats or some basic information about the program. The minimum notice period that any customer will have is 1 hour. So customers will have a minimum of 1 hour notification, but it could be up to 7 days. And in general terms, we would expect the market would know of a shortfall in a reasonable amount of time. So we'd expect hours and days of notice in a typical example. Now, customers are activated within a 10-minute period once they've nominated their particular load to be offered to participate in that event. The events can last from anywhere from 1 hour to 4 hours maximum. The maximum number of events that can occur in any year is 10, and the period that customers would be called upon to respond is from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. weekdays.
So it's the with that the arena one, the fundamental, well, the main method of revenue is actually that availability payment, isn't it?
Correct. So there is a payment for actual participation, but the bulk of the payment is made for participation or signing up to the program and being able to essentially, once you've passed the test and delivered the response to the market, how it's been registered, then the customer's eligible for what we call participation payments, which are significant.
So when we were designing this program, putting our request in, we sort of did it that way because particularly in New South Wales, where there's less likelihood to be called upon, the availability payments are a critical part of that, because at least those participate get a reasonable kick, they get a reasonable funding for it. Where in Victoria and New South Australia, we've got quite a different model where most of the money's coming through the other method, which David's going to go through now.
Participating, as opposed to New South Wales, where you get paid by not necessarily having to participate.
Yeah,
that's right. So leading on from that, we talk about the Victorian SA model. In this particular one, we have two versions of the product, which is a 10-minute and a 60-minute. So the 10-minute, it requires customers to respond in 10 minutes, and the 60-minute obviously is an hour's response. So, sorry, just go back. So in this particular example, customers are paid for participation, paid a small amount for participation in the program where they have signed up to the 10-minute product. But significantly more payment is made when customers are actually called to deliver the demand response. So it's a different type of program. So one works in the example of New South Wales, payments are made predominantly for participation. In Victoria and South Australian, most of the payments are made when customers actually deliver demand response to the market. Now again, we are expecting more call for demand response in SA and Victoria than certainly in New South Wales. So again, it's an appropriate program for the particular market. And this particular one is, again, there's a 1 hour or a 10-minute product, depending on which one you sign up for. The 10-minute does require the controller to be installed, and the maximum duration of any event, again, is 4 hours, and there's a maximum number of up to 30. And I think also it's important to mention at this point that customers can opt out. So customers enroll, and of the expectation that where possible they will deliver the demand response, but if for any reason a customer is unable to, then the customer can simply opt out of that particular event. So it's an incredibly good scheme in terms of giving customers an opportunity to earn additional revenue without significant obligation.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the controller, which we call smart technology. Basically, this is a device that's installed on the site. It will provide a signal to the site to indicate demand responses required, and the customer's site will then do something with that signal. It will usually take that signal and automate part or amount of load that the customer's agreed to curtail in response to the event. So again, it allows for the customer to respond very quickly and fully automated. Now, it's important to remember that the customer always has the option to proceed or not to proceed. So there's a messaging system, which we'll cover next, which allows a customer to opt in or opt out of any event. So the automation technology is there to provide the signal, but ultimately the customer is still in control. An additional benefit of this technology is to provide the live data feed of both the market price and also the customer's load. So in instantaneous, or what we call real time, the customer can see what their consumption is doing. This means the customer can now start making different decisions about how they use energy in response to different periods of pricing in the market. So it's an incredibly valuable tool where customers can move small amounts of load around into different periods of the day that can result in significant savings. It also provides the alerts and obviously the automation, which I've covered. So let's talk very briefly about how a customer would actually participate in an event. So what actually happens? Well, first of all, the market operator will predict a a demand period or an increase, a period where demand is likely to exceed the supply available in the market. Flowpower will be notified of this event, and then Flowpower would contact its customers to advise them that the available supply is likely to be exceeded and a demand response event is likely to occur. So Flowpower will provide as much notice to customers as it has available from the market. So this will include regular updates throughout the week and days preceding any event. So customers can reasonably expect to be well informed about the likelihood and probability of events occurring well ahead of time. And as we get closer and closer to predicted events, Flowpower will keep its customers informed about the probability and the likelihood of events occurring. So this is a basic example of what we would expect to see. So from our end, what happens was we would send you a message, and it would be an SMS and an email. So the SMS, an example is shown here, that we would notify you of the event, the time that we expect it to start and finish, and any impact that will have. So customers would then respond by clicking the link to acknowledge yes or no that they're able to respond or participate in the event. Now, this is the opt-in, opt-out principle that I discussed earlier. We're giving the customer the ultimate control if they want to participate in this particular event. So there's a roster or a duty system that our response or notification follows based on a primary, secondary or tertiary contact in the system. So again, if we're unable to reach a particular contact, our system will then work through to the next layer of the notifications and try the secondary and tertiary contacts for the site until it gets a response. So assuming that the customer approves the activation and is happy to proceed with the demand response, we receive that back at our end, and then that is loaded into the controller on site, and the controller will essentially have a schedule of which it will initiate the demand response. Now, if anything changes from our point, from the system or the market, we will then send you additional notifications via SMS or email to, again, notify you of what's happening or what changes have occurred in the market. And again, in some cases, we will seek additional approval for any change in duration of the event or starting times. Yeah. So the controller then will, at the time of the event, power down or send a signal to your site. Your site would then respond by powering down the equipment that it's agreed to curtail for that period of time. And some examples, a site may switch to generator and use the generator supply as a good example. So I guess one of the things to highlight here is that the smart technology or the automation actually allows a customer to participate in these events very, very easily. It takes the emphasis on the operator or the people on site to have to physically control or switch load to an automated system where ultimately the customer receives a message through their mobile phone that they can agree to or not agree to actually curtail load. And this is important when we start talking about some of these demand response programs where the response time is important, and also in terms of being able to respond to market price. Yeah. So the technology is there to support the customer. It's there to give them a new set of tools to allow them to get the most out of these demand response programs. Yeah,
and those and David's covered the complete end-to-end automated. There's also you can also get the messages and manually respond as well. That's right.
So for the 1 hour. There's a version of the product for Victorian South Australia, which is a 1 hour product, and customers can participate in that through a manual response, meaning that they'll get the SMS notifications, but may not necessarily have any automation installed on their site.
Yeah, so no controller. Yeah. Someone needs to respond to that event.
They certainly can.
Approved, go down and physically do something.
That's right. They certainly can have a controller installed and participate in that, but it may be a good example where a customer doesn't yet have the controller installed.
Yeah, and it's also the controller can also just be installed and not actually control equipment as well.
Correct.
And give you the live data and feedback that, hey, has it worked, or has John down the road has actually shut that pump off, and you better see with the live data.
Yep.
So even without the automation there, the controller still provides that feedback.
Yeah, operational tool.
Operational tool.
It's a very good point, yeah.
Yeah.
It's giving a customer a new set of tools and information at his fingertips
Yeah.
that he otherwise would never have had. So,
But it's probably important to say the barriers to participating in programs are quite low. It could be the controller, or it could be just a process of getting notifications and responding where you can, basically.
again, there's not really any penalties for customers not participating. It's an opt-in based on your ability to participate. So we would encourage as many customers as possible to jump on board and get involved with these types of programs, because it does give them an additional and potentially fairly significant revenue stream for the summer period by just simply enrolling and being able to offer demand response.
Yeah.
So we're going to look at a case study. So I'm going to hand over to Will now.
Thanks, David. So let's start. So this is a made-up scenario. Let's imagine AEMO predict next Tuesday demand to peak at 3 p.m. So it's about 6 days ahead of time. Due to a shortage in supply from power stations, they're not able to meet that forecast demand, and AEMO would then issue a lack of reserve 1 to the market. Flowpower would include this information in our weekly report to customers, or possibly by other means, to keep you informed as soon as possible. Sometime leading up to the Tuesday, AEMO have decided conditions have gotten worse for whatever reason. Could be some unscheduled works, could be a number of things, change in weather conditions, and they've now issued a lack of reserve 2. And in this condition, Flowpower will trigger our demand response program. And that takes us to the start of our notification process, which David has loosely covered previously, but let's go again with our scenario. So Bill is an operator of a manufacturing facility. He signed his side up to provide 500 kilowatts of capacity. We will send Bill a notification, SMS and email, at the minimum 30 minutes prior to the event. Ideally, in this scenario, we have more time, so we would send it further ahead in time to allow him to make the most informed decision. This SMS and email he receives is for him to confirm that his site can participate in the event and that they haven't got any issues with the participation. So on the right, it's what you would see down the bottom, you'll see approve or disapprove. You've got general information about the event, the period, when it is, and at this stage, all of this information will have been decided upon about AEMO. As David hinted at before, that there's a chance that it may change leading up to this, and this would get resent out. But just to keep it simple, we've got this event running, and Bill has received it because he's the primary contact. So he receives the alert first, and this is our tiered notification system. If Bill wasn't to respond, we would send another message to the secondary contact, and this is Sam. If for some reason Sam doesn't respond, we then send a third message to Tara, who we call the backup contact.
So just briefly on just one thing to keep in mind, that it's a tiered system, so it's got multiple redundancies, and those secondary and backup ones are very much what they are, they're backups. But just keep in mind that if Bill responds, Sam doesn't get the message.
Correct.
But we can change that, so Bill and Sam get the message.
Yes. The system's very
flexible.
Very flexible, and sometimes too flexible, but we want to make it simple and whatever works for each customer.
Yep.
There's a little note that I've actually missed there at the end, and that is another category of contacts is general information contacts. Now they're notified at the very beginning when the first message would have gone out to Sam, just as an FYI. They don't need to respond. There's nothing for them to do. It's more so that they're across the situation, which is there is an event coming up.
Yep. And it's also true that that approve, disapprove is obviously designed for when there's a physical equipment that's there that's going to shut down, a generator might start. But we'll also get it if you're just a manual responding.
Yes.
That might start. But we'll also get it if you're just a manual responding.
Yes.
The approve, disapprove tells us that you're participating.
Yes.
Which is also important to us.
It indicates that you're going to respond to the event, that you can respond in those situations where you're manually required to carry out a process.
Yeah. And that's important for us, that we understand how much is going to respond, because we'll ask for more people. If we don't get the response we need, we'll go and ask for more people to respond.
Yep.
So that's why the approve, disapprove is there for both types.
Helps us as the aggregator.
Yeah.
So in this case, Bill has approves the activation, and the controller is then scheduled to power down some of the site's equipment, and obviously up to that limit of 500 kilowatts. The controller automates this next process, obviously making this very quick and effective. Once the event has ended, the controller will restore operations as to they were before the event, and proceed with his day.
Yeah.
So Bill receives a payment for their successful participation. If, for an example, he wanted to participate but actually site wasn't running, he won't be able to obtain a payment. The site had to have been operational leading up to the event. Bill's on wholesale, so he also gets a saving from responding to the high price event, which is likely to coincide with an LOR event. Remembering that the LOR events are scheduled when there's a shortage in supply. So there's a very good chance that the spot market will be at a high price.
Increasing his returns.
Yes, which is great for Bill, because maybe you'll get that long-sorted promotion. Participating in the demand response will alter usage and look like the orange lines. So at the time of the event, which is the spike of the blue line, they shut down. In this case, the graph indicates most of the site. And then the event pretty much passes just as their site starts to ramp up again, and then maybe an hour or two later, they're back at normal operations. So bringing it all together in terms of the demand response programs, there's a new revenue stream. It works in conjunction with wholesale purchasing solutions, so you can think of them as being parallel. The K-Watch Intelligent Controller makes responding to either event for wholesale or the demand response easy and automatic. That is configurable as to how automatic you want it. And it obviously ensures reliability, that these signals are being responded to in a timely fashion. Next steps, give us a call. There's our number. In a little bit more detail, if you want to have a bit more of a chat about the K-Watch controller and determine if it's right for your business, give us a call. Provide you with an agreement. And then for those who require the controller, it'll require installation, testing, commissioning, and that gets it to a level where we can control equipment remotely. And then you're good, you're live, ready to go. And that would also indicate that you're receiving real-time live data, as well as having the ability to control equipment on site.
Yeah, that's great, Will. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go through a few of our questions and try to get through them. And let me just start having a look at them. So another question there that someone asked there is, this is an interesting question, I'll see who answers this one, but how did Victoria end up with a situation where the political decision was made to close Hazelwood when it was known there was almost going to be a certain net shortfall in power? So I think probably I'll have a go, but please chime in. But I'm not sure it was a political decision. It was an independent company that made the decision to close it. And I guess under the rules of the current market, which the Finkel review did identify, that the ability to close a power station with a 3-month notice, I think, was probably a significant oversight in the design of the market. And I think that's probably caused a lot of issues. There wasn't enough time for the market to react to the replacement of that generator. And I would say that the generator was pretty much at end of life.
Yep.
I don't know how accurate it is, but I understood that there was large shipping containers stacked next to the generators full of sand for the possibility of them failing.
Right.
So it was. I'm reasonably certain that that's an accurate statement, but it was pretty much end of life. It was a very old generator.
Yeah.
Was it the best decision? Well, that's probably. I'll leave that one for someone else to answer. But it was. Yeah.
Another thing to consider is a little bit sidestepping it here. I'll be open about it. But AEMO have just released a report which states actually what they've been doing to get ready for this summer. They're very aware of what's likely to be going on, and it's a worthy read just to go through for each state what they're doing in terms of providing extra supply. Demand response, that's this program, and various other things. And I think in Victoria they've hustled somewhere around 800 to 900 megawatts of additional supply for this coming summer.
Yeah, it doesn't change the fact that prices have gone through the roof. They are some of the most expensive we've ever seen, and that is costing customers dearly. As people come to renew their contracts, they're going 4 to 16 or 18 cents a kilowatt hour for peak, and it's pretty hard. It's pretty hard. So, but there are solutions. The demand response program gives you the ability to get some return, and probably the other big thing which you may have heard that Flowpath is doing is there are solutions to it, because we're providing access to wind and solar generation, large scale PPA, and that's coming in at less than half market rates if customers can access it. So what we're allowing to do is allowing customers to sign directly with large-scale renewables at about half the market rate. So although it's difficult for customers as they try to renew their contracts, we are trying to find alternatives in the market.
Yep.
The demand response program is one of them. The PPA stuff's another, and we'll keep searching for them, definitely.
I think it's important to also emphasise that demand response is common around in other parts of the world.
Yes.
And it's really at its infancy in Australia, and it is a critical part to fixing some of the energy issues we have in the market. And I think any kind of report that you read on the market will often refer to demand response as one of the fixes to the solution of the market. And demand response is really about connecting customers to market signals.
Yeah.
And where you can do that and customers can respond, you have a much more efficient market, as Matthew alluded to earlier on.
Yeah, if we can get, our vision would be to have 5, 10, 20% of the market purchasing wholesale. Now, not everyone will respond to signals, but if you just had that percentage of the market responding to some degree, we'd be in a very different market. We wouldn't be having the issues we're having today.
Profile would look very different throughout a summary day.
Yeah, it sure would. It would probably solve the issues. So, as it's first in, first served, when would we find out if we are in or out of the activation? So who can answer that one?
Do you want me to have a go?
Yeah, have a go.
Yeah, so essentially, Flowpower will send out a request to customers who have enrolled, asking them to participate. And as you've indicated there, that an order of priority, depending on when the customers respond, once that capacity is filled, we would then confirm via a message to say that your site has been activated and enrolled in the program, or will be activated, I should say, and enrolled in the program. It's also probably worth mentioning that there's always the possibility that you may not be called. You may be activated, but you may not be called to actually participate, depending on the particular program. So a lot of it is about getting AEMO having that capacity ready to call on demand.
That's the nature of the different products, as it provides AEMO with a suite of tools that can provide last-minute decision making.
Yeah.
And hence the different lead times across the different states.
Yeah. I've got a question here. If the spot market prices does not eventuate, does the participant still receive payment for their participation?
Yes, that's the answer. These are separate programs.
Yeah. So definitely think of them as separate, but remember that it's likely that at a LOR event you'll see high price events.
Yeah.
It's coming from the same reason, supply and demand, shortage in supply, and that pushes prices up.
Yeah.
Very simply.
Yeah. So that we spoke about that concept before, the idea of what we call natural demand response. That's basically where people are responding to a market price.
Yep.
That's what most of our Flowpower customers already do,
Yes.
and they get very good benefits out of it when there's volatility. This is a bit different. This is the network operator saying, we think we've got a constraint.
Yes.
Please load shed. And the price may not be there. So you can even have a negative price when you're asked to load shed. So if you had some form of network failure, and we've seen it before where the market's been in an LOR state, and the market price has potentially even been negative, but we're still required to load shed due to constraints in the market. So it's not impossible that could occur.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that these demand reserves are contingency demand reserves. They're only used in these situations where the operator is concerned about everyone getting electrons and avoiding possibility of rolling blackouts.
Yeah. It's about keeping the lights on, really.
Exactly. At the end of the day, that's precisely what it's about.
Yeah. Let me answer
Do you have to have the controller to participate in demand response, David?
No. So with the New South Wales program, yes, there is a requirement to have the technology installed, and that's part of the automation requirement with that program. In the Victorian program, no, you have the option to manually participate through the 1 hour product. If you wish to participate in the 10-minute product, which has higher value, you will require the controller.
Is that actually in Victoria? If you want to participate in the 10-minute program, the requirement to have the controller is based around the fact that you need to be able to respond in the time frame.
Correct. Yeah, it's the 10-minute time frame.
Physical limitation
of activation.
Yep.
So once you get that final notification, it's happening.
Yep.
You need to shed that load within 10 minutes.
Yep.
Hence the controller.
Yeah. And you've got to remember that in that 10 minutes, you've got time to respond and come back. So, 10 minutes could turn into 5 minutes. So that's where the automation sort of needed.
Correct.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So, it says, what are the requirements for the site to link with K-Watch to its SCADA systems?
Want me to answer that one?
Yeah. Yep.
So, essentially, the K-Watch controller will provide a signal to the site, and that signal is typically through a relay output or a set of clean contacts from the controller. That signal is then fed. It can be easily fed into a SCADA system through a digital input, and that SCADA system would then be programmed to control or respond in a certain way. So again, it's entirely up to the customer how you want to do that and how you want to participate. The controller really just provides the signal remotely to the site to tell you that there is a requirement to participate.
And then the existing control equipment on that site will interpret that signal. So, having a PLC is a different solution to SCADA, but both of which definitely can be programmed to interpret that signal.
Yep.
So another question here is, so I think this is a follow-up to one of the early questions. So we would know we are included in activation and will be paid prior to shutting down any equipment.
So you won't be paid prior to shutting down. I think that there's a correction there in that next question.
Yep.
You'll be paid once. So the way in which the process works is we are required to submit the data to the program operator, be that ARENA or AMO, and they will then assess how much load has been delivered to the market, and then based on their determination, that will be payments will be made to the customers based on what Flowpower receives from that aggregated load. Now, obviously, we can look at that at a customer and site level very easily and look at how much load has been delivered for that period. There's a couple of considerations here. One is there is a baseline methodology that is covered in the contracts. So this baseline methodology is designed to recognise or determine what a customer would have typically been using during that period. And so the baseline methodology is used by the market operator to determine the amount of load that's delivered, as well as obviously live data.
So essentially they're looking in previous periods on usually the last 10 odd days.
Yep.
There's a couple other conditions to it, but to see what you were doing then, and that helps them work out what you've actually shared relative to those averages.
That's right, yes.
So the Yeah, so you actually, it's the result. It is based on the measured shutdown amount.
Yes.
That the payment's based on.
In the New South Wales, it's a little different in that there's actually the participation payments are made based on the capacity that's been tested and delivered to the market. So customers are paid for participation. They are paid an additional amount for curtailment or reduction of load. That's a separate amount.
And that's calculated the same way across.
It is, yeah, it's very similar. But in Victorian, in South Australia, the customers predominantly receives their payments for the amount of load that's delivered.
If you get really interested, you can read up on the about the baseline methodology. It's a little bit involved, but we do take care of it for you. We can calculate it. We can work out which sites we should be shedding and so forth. So we do take care of that for you.
Yeah, we're certainly trying to avoid asking customers to curtail who potentially may not receive a reasonable amount of benefit from doing so.
Yes.
I think that's probably one of the unique parts of our particular program is that we have access to data and live data that we can determine customers' participation in any given event.
Yeah. Okay. We probably need to wrap it up. I think the time is running on. So we probably won't get through everything we've got here, but what we'll do is we'll come back, and anyone that's asked questions will try and come back to you with answers. But everyone, thank you so much for your participation today. It's an exciting program. Please give us a call because there is a lot of information that we've covered today, and there's probably questions that'll continue to come up as you think through it. I guess the main message that those that are interested in participating, please contact us because we don't have a lot of time between now and summer. The payments are pretty reasonable, and it is a first in, first served type thing in terms of participation. We don't have unlimited load to participate as well. So if you are interested in participating, please come and let us know, and we need to get you set up as quickly as possible. But thank you, David and Will, for today, and thank you all for participating in today's session. So this will be made available for you all later on as well. We'll send you an email and let us know if you've got any questions.
Yeah, and you can share it with your colleagues afterwards, anyone who's participating.
Yeah. So thank you for your time, and we'll talk to you all soon.